This is the real reason you keep waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and it has nothing to do with willpower. And everything to do with a hormone called cortisol your body releases while you sleep. 40% of older adults worldwide report poor sleep quality, and that figure comes from a meta-analysis of 252 studies, covering close to 1 million people aged 60 and older. Within the United States alone, more than 1 in 4 adults over 60 struggle to stay asleep through the night. According to National Health Interview survey data analyzed between 2005 and 2020, if you snore heavily or gasp awake, sleep apnea may be a separate issue requiring evaluation, but for the majority experiencing these awakenings, the cause runs deeper. What most people never hear is that sleep disruption at this age follows a very specific biological pattern. And once you understand that pattern, you can work with it instead of fighting it without reaching for a single pill. Over the next 20 minutes, we are going to walk through exactly what happens inside your body between the moment you fall asleep and the moment you snap awake in the dark. We will cover the hormone cortisol that quietly climbs while you sleep, why looking at the clock ranks among the worst things you can do, how bedroom temperature alters your brain chemistry, a breathing technique that resets your nervous system in minutes, why what you do in your first hour of morning sunlight programs how well you sleep that night, and what peer-reviewed research actually tells us about magnesium and melatonin. Every claim in this video traces back to published peer-reviewed science with no invented numbers and no exaggeration. Section 1. What happens while you sleep? Before we can explain the 2 a.m. awakening, you need to see what your brain does across an entire night of sleep. Sleep cycles through distinct stages roughly every 90 minutes, moving from lighter sleep down into deeper sleep and then into dream sleep. And a full night contains 4 to 6 of these cycles back to back. Deep sleep, what researchers call slow-wave sleep or N3, packs itself into the first third of the night, and that is when your body runs its heaviest repair work. Brain waves decelerate, muscles go slack, and growth hormone floods the bloodstream. None of the other sleep stages come close to matching this level of restoration. But here's the catch. As the hours pass, you get less and less of that deep sleep, and by the second half of the night, your cycles tilt toward lighter stages and longer stretches of dreaming. That shift is where the trouble begins. Maurice Ohayon led a major meta-analysis published in the journal Sleep in 2004 that pulled together 65 studies covering over 3,500 people, ages 5 through 102. 2% per decade. That is how fast deep slow-wave sleep declines from young adulthood through middle age. At the same time, the minutes you spend lying awake after first falling asleep climb by roughly 10 minutes per decade between your 30s and your 60s. Eve Van Cauter and her team at the University of Chicago confirmed this in a study published in JAMA in the year 2000, tracking 149 healthy men aged 16 to 83. What surprised them was the timing. The steepest drop in deep sleep happens between ages 25 and 45, earlier than most people expect. A second wave of decline follows in the 60s and 70s, and that wave brings more frequent awakenings throughout the night. Waking up more often after 60 is not a sign that something has gone wrong with you. This is a well-documented biological shift that happens to virtually everyone alive, and the sleep architecture of your brain has simply changed. Section 2. The cortisol clock inside your body. While your sleep grows lighter in the second half of the night, something else is happening at the same time, and almost nobody talks about it. A hormone called cortisol begins to rise. People call cortisol the stress hormone, but that label only covers part of what it does. Cortisol runs on a precise 24-hour rhythm, bottoming out around midnight, which lines up with your deepest sleep, and then climbing from roughly 2 to 3 in the morning until it peaks near 8:30 a.m. This rise happens even when sleep pressure from adenosine, the chemical that builds tiredness throughout the day, should keep you asleep. De Bono and colleagues documented this cortisol pattern in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2009 by sampling cortisol every 20 minutes in 33 subjects. Picture what that means inside your body at 2 or 3 a.m. Deep sleep has mostly run its course for the night, your cycles have shifted toward lighter stages, and right at that same window, cortisol starts climbing. Lighter sleep plus a rising alertness hormone is the biological recipe for waking up. And cortisol does not climb smoothly. Lightman and Conway Campbell reported in Nature Reviews Neuroscience in 2010 that it arrives in pulses, roughly 15 to 22 of them across a 24-hour period, and each pulse edges you a little closer to consciousness. Balbo, Leproux, and Van Cauter spelled out this connection in the International Journal of Endocrinology in 2010, showing that nighttime awakenings track with those pulsatile cortisol bursts. What makes this worse with age is that the cortisol rhythm flattens. Van Cauter, Leproux, and Kupfer published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 1996 that older adults carry a higher nighttime cortisol floor and the rise kicks in earlier, which means the hormone that should nudge you awake at 7 in the morning starts its work closer to 3. Chronic stress amplifies the whole cycle. Vgansas and colleagues reported in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2001 that people with chronic insomnia showed elevated cortisol and ACTH around the entire 24-hour clock, especially near bedtime. Their conclusion was blunt. Insomnia, in their words, is a disorder of central nervous system hyperarousal rather than one of sleep loss. When you snap awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, your body is running a program, not rolling the dice. If you're waking to urinate, that's a separate pathway called nocturia that affects up to 60% of older adults. But what we're discussing is the cortisol-driven awakening pattern. What matters is what you do in the next few minutes. Section 3. The clock-watching trap. And what most people do in those next few minutes is the single worst move available to them. They check the time. Nicole Tang, Danielle Schmidt, and Allison Harvey tested this directly in an experiment published in 2007 in the Journal of Behavioral and Experimental Psychiatry, and the paper carried a title that says it all: Sleeping with the Enemy. They recruited 30 good sleepers and 30 poor sleepers, randomly assigned half to monitor the clock and half to avoid it, and the gap between the two groups opened immediately. Clock watchers reported more pre-sleep worry and took longer to fall asleep. Among 38 primary insomnia patients in a second arm of the study, those assigned to watch the clock overestimated their time to fall asleep by an average of about 24 minutes compared to controls. The author's conclusion, and these are their exact words, was that clock monitoring fuels pre-sleep worry and exacerbates misperception of sleep. Consider what fires inside your head the moment you see 2:45 glowing on the nightstand. You calculate that only 4 hours remain before the alarm. You tally how long you have been lying awake, and you project exhaustion onto the entire day ahead. Each calculation spikes arousal, your heart rate tick up, and cortisol, already on the rise, gets an extra jolt from the anxiety. Allison Harvey mapped out exactly why this spirals in a 2002 paper in Behavior Research and Therapy. Worry triggers autonomic arousal, which funnels your attention towards sleep-related threats like the clock, which breeds more worry, which drives more arousal. The cycle feeds itself and rarely stops on its own. Nearly 5,000 sleep center patients confirmed this pattern in a 2023 study by Dawson and colleagues. Time monitoring behavior, especially the frustration that comes with it, directly worsened insomnia severity. The researchers had a phrase for it: losing sleep over losing sleep. The fix could not be simpler. Turn the clock to face the wall and put your phone face down in another room. American Academy of Sleep Medicine clinical practice guidelines list clock watching as a hyperarousal behavior, and their stimulus control instruction tells patients that if sleep has not come within about 20 minutes, they should leave the bed. But here is the critical detail: that 20 minutes should be felt, never measured by watching a clock. At 3 a.m., nothing good comes from knowing the time. Section 4. Breathing your way to calm. You have woken up, you have kept your eyes off the clock, and now you need a way back to sleep. A simple change in how you breathe can shift your entire nervous system, and there is solid physiology behind why. Stress and anxiety hand control to the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight branch which drives your heart rate up, makes your breathing fast and shallow, and keeps your body primed for action. Falling back asleep requires tipping the balance toward the parasympathetic side, the rest and digest branch, and the fastest voluntary lever you have for doing that is your breath. Specifically, it comes down to extending your exhale. Each inhale briefly dials down vagus nerve activity and lifts heart rate slightly, and each exhale does the opposite, boosting vagal tone and dropping heart rate. Physiologists call this respiratory sinus arrhythmia. When you deliberately stretch your exhale longer than your inhale, every single breath cycle nudges the balance toward parasympathetic dominance. Dr. Andrew Weil, a physician at the University of Arizona Center for Integrative Medicine, built a technique around this principle called the 4-7-8 method, adapted from yogic pranayama. You place the tip of your tongue against the ridge of tissue just behind your upper front teeth, exhale completely through your mouth with a whoosh sound, then inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4, Hold for a count of 7, and exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 8. That completes 1 cycle, and you repeat for 4 cycles total. Whale calls it a natural tranquilizer for the nervous system, and what matters is the 4 to 7 to 8 ratio, not the absolute speed. The extended exhale does the heavy lifting. On the evidence side, Vieira and colleagues published a 2022 study in Physiological Reports testing the 4-7-8 technique in 43 healthy young adults and found that it immediately lowered heart rate and blood pressure while boosting high-frequency heart rate variability, a direct marker of parasympathetic activity. That said, this was an acute physiology measurement, not a long-term insomnia trial. Broader research on slow breathing paints a stronger picture. Tsai and colleagues reported in Psychophysiology in 2015 that 20 minutes of slow-paced breathing at bedtime improved both objective and subjective sleep quality in people with insomnia. Laborde and colleagues followed up in 2019, finding that 15 minutes per night of slow-paced breathing sustained over 30 days improved sleep quality scores along with overnight vagal activity. Resonance frequency breathing, roughly 6 breaths per minute, pushes heart rate oscillation amplitude up 4 to 10 times above resting baseline, as reviewed by Schaffer and Meehan in Frontiers in Neuroscience in 2020. Full transparency here. No large-scale randomized controlled trial of the 4-7-8 technique has been run in older adults with chronic insomnia, and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine does not include it among recommended insomnia therapies. What is well established is the underlying physiology that slow extended exhale breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And unlike any pill on the market, this approach carries 0 side effects. Section 5. Your bedroom temperature is a sleep drug. Most people put all their attention on mattresses, pillows, and blackout curtains and completely ignore the single environmental factor with the strongest link to deep sleep: temperature. As evening sets in, your core body temperature starts dropping, and that drop ranks among the strongest signals your brain uses to trigger sleep. Kanyaachi and colleagues quantified this in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 1992, finding that nocturnal melatonin secretion is, and this is their language, temporally coupled with the decline of core temperature, with a correlation of 0.97. That number represents a near-perfect lock between the two. Both the Sleep Foundation and the Cleveland Clinic converge on a cool bedroom, with the Sleep Foundation citing approximately 65 degrees Fahrenheit, about 18 Celsius, and the Cleveland Clinic suggesting 60 to 67 degrees. Okamoto-Mizuno backed this up in the Journal of Physiological Anthropology in 2012, confirming that heat exposure increases wakefulness while cutting into both slow-wave sleep and dream sleep. A warm room steals your deepest sleep. But here is where it gets complicated for anyone over 60. Aging weakens your body's thermoregulation, and that directly destabilizes sleep. Raymond and Van Someren published in the journal Sleep in 2008 that elderly insomniacs have a diminished capability to recognize the optimal temperature for sleep initiation, meaning the temperature that feels comfortable while you lie awake may not match what your body actually needs to fall asleep. Raymond, Schwab, and Van Someren tested this in a study published in the journal Brain in 2008, and the results stopped people in their tracks. A 0.4 degrees Celsius bump in skin temperature, barely perceptible to the touch, suppressed nocturnal wakefulness to a striking degree. Among elderly subjects, that tiny warming was, and these are the researchers' words, sufficient to almost double the proportion of nocturnal slow-wave sleep and to decrease the probability of early morning awakening from 0.58 to 0.04. A 2023 study sharpened this picture for seniors specifically. Amir Baniasadi and colleagues at Harvard tracked 50 community-dwelling adults aged 65 and older in Boston over roughly 18 months using wearable sensors, publishing their results in the journal Science of the Total Environment. Sleep peaked in efficiency between 68 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 25 Celsius, and dropped 5 to 10% once the ambient temperature climbed above 77. 68 to 77 degrees sits well above the conventional 60 to 67 degree advice you hear everywhere else. And the lead author emphasized that seniors may need a warmer room than younger adults because their thermoregulation has weakened. Standard advice, in other words, may need personalizing as you age. A good starting point is 65 to 68 degrees. Pay attention to how you feel during the night, and if you are waking up cold or noticing cold hands and feet, nudge the thermostat up a degree or two. The goal is to let your core temperature drop naturally without leaving you physically uncomfortable. Everything we have covered today connects back to one idea. The 2 to 3 a.m. awakening is not a mystery. It is biology running on schedule. By that hour, your deep sleep has mostly run its course. Cortisol has begun climbing from its midnight low, and your cycles have tilted toward lighter stages. Past 60, this pattern sharpens because slow-wave sleep has declined. Your cortisol floor sits higher than it once did, and your thermoregulation has lost precision. Every one of those factors responds to changes you can make without a prescription. Face the clock toward the wall. Research confirms that watching the clock feeds anxiety and deepens insomnia, and at 3 a.m. the time on the display holds zero useful information. Use slow breathing with a stretched exhale to pull your nervous system from fight or flight into rest and digest. The 4-7-8 method works well for this, but any pattern where your exhale outlasts your inhale engages the same vagal pathway. Keep your bedroom cool and personalize the number. Standard advice falls between 60 and 67 degrees, but research on seniors suggests better results closer to 68 to 77 degrees. Support the natural drop in core temperature without leaving yourself cold. Get outside into bright light, especially sunlight, within the first hour or two of waking. That resets your master clock and schedules melatonin release 14 to 16 hours later. This single morning habit may shape your nighttime sleep more than anything else you do. If magnesium interests you, bring it up with your doctor first, especially if kidney function or drug interactions are in play. Deficiency rates run high, but the trial evidence remains limited. And if melatonin interests you, the research favors very low doses, around 0.3 milligrams, aimed at circadian timing, not sedation, and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine does not recommend it for chronic insomnia. The historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years digging through archives of pre-industrial European and American life and surfaced over 2,000 references to what people called first sleep and second sleep. Before gas lamps and electric light, sleeping in 2 segments was ordinary. People would drift off after dark, wake for roughly an hour around midnight for prayer, quiet conversation, or small tasks, and then settle into a second sleep until dawn. Waking in the night was not treated as a disorder. It was simply part of how humans slept. Your body is not broken. It is following patterns woven deeply into human biology, and the tools to work with those patterns rather than against them are available to every one of us without a single prescription. If this helped you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone in your life who struggles with sleep. Understanding is the first step, and now you have it.